This is Patrick McCarthy reporting with Tri-Cities Community Television. We're back in our mobile studios in Lee Square in Port Coquitlam, and today we have the former MP of our region, Finn Donnelly. Finn Donnelly, thanks for coming in.
Thanks for having me, Patrick.
And I think it's always great to have a politician who's active in the community and has active in the environmental agenda, but then at the same time you're no longer a politician. So how does that feel to be freed from that actual title, and what are you doing and how does that feel?
Well, it feels very different. I've been in politics for the last 17 years, 10 federally, 7 with Coquitlam City Council. So it's very different for sure. I mean, I'm very excited. I'm happy to be back in the community as you say, a former politician, but focused really on the nonprofit society that I started before I got into politics, the Watershed Society of British Columbia. And I'm very excited about the work that I'm doing in regards to what we've been working on for 24 years. So, but I'm shifting my perspective from one of politics where I was flying back and forth to Ottawa every week to now being able to be at home, spend more time with my family, with my wife, and go for a walk, have dinner, be in the same place at the same time, and just enjoy a little bit more, which is nice.
Yeah, especially when you're looking at the pipeline stories going on. You're probably thinking, thank goodness I don't have to answer those questions, or at least weigh into something that's very contentious, and I know it's never simple in politics.
Well, there's never a dull moment in politics. I can say over my 10 years, there's many issues, like you're referring to the Wet'suwet'en issue that's currently got all of the House of Commons involved with that issue, and right across the country, and it's a big issue. And there have been many issues over the decade like that, and there will be to come in the next decade. So, I do, on one hand, miss those. Those were exciting issues to deal with. They were tough, they were challenging. But that's what, as a representative of the Tri-Cities, that I felt I was sent to Ottawa to do, was to try to resolve those issues.
And you have come back from Ottawa because you've got this, you're looking for some funding for the Fraser, the Watershed, and I guess I want to also plug in there as well. I mean, for you, the environmental impact of the Fraser is one thing, but you seem to have a very strong connection with the First Nations community and their connection to that resource or that river. So just give us a sense of what does that trip to Ottawa was all about, and what we were able to achieve.
Yeah, we have a significant initiative called the Fraser Watershed Initiative that I've been working on in the last 2 years. And it's really a significant focus on habitat restoration. So looking at how do we restore salmon habitat within all 6 regions of the Fraser Watershed. And the Fraser Watershed is a huge area. It covers a quarter of the province, 21 million acres. So it's a large, or hectares. It's a large area, a large expanse. With much diversity, ecologically, culturally, community, economic. So it's a very important watershed, very important river to our country, to our province, to the area. So we've given a very place-based focus, and we're calling it the Fraser Watershed Initiative. There's huge issues that need attention, and we are encouraging federal, provincial, excuse me, and community to come together with a $500 million restoration effort to repair some of the damage done over the past half century or century.
Yeah, when you talk about the damage, like what kind of damage? We hear about the salmon runs, but what kind of things are you concerned about?
Well, we are very concerned about salmon and the Fraser. We had the worst return in sockeye salmon in recorded history since 1891 when we started recording returns to the Fraser. We had over 100 million salmon that would come to the Fraser. That wouldn't be an unusual thing pre-1950. Since then, we've seen a steady decline in returns, not just in sockeye and Chinook as well, others, not just salmon as well. We've had other species that are impacted, and we're losing habitat. There's pollution impacts, climate change. There's a number of issues. Salmon farms, you would, I think, best describe it as cumulative impacts over time have affected the Fraser, and even though this is one of the largest and most significant salmon producing systems on the planet, it is still in trouble. So we think a significant effort to conserve, protect, and restore the Fraser is needed. One of the things that we would focus on is obviously tree planting in the riparian area, looking at how we would fix salmon streams, restore those streams back to at least some function. Some habitat has been destroyed a lot in the Fraser estuary, in the lower Fraser where we are here in the lower mainland. Up to 75% of traditional habitat is gone, and that's been replaced by human habitat. So roads, bridges, houses, buildings, things that we need to have for our lives and our economies and communities, but at the same time has had tremendous cost to other industries like the fishing industry. So we need to look at how do we restore in a significant way, unless we don't value these salmon and we are fine with losing them. And that could happen. I'm hoping to avoid that. I don't want to see the salmon go the way of the cod on the East Coast. And they are still reeling from losing the cod runs back, and they haven't rebounded. So this is an opportunity for government, federal and provincial, to look at, and First Nations, how we can work together to restore these runs before it's too late.
And you're talking $500 million. It sounds like a lot of money, but really, is there? You've just come from Ottawa, so is there? I know you had a lot of initiatives before, which were near and dear to you, and it got caught up in that political malaise. So is this $500 million secure, or you still have to go through a bunch of steps to get that?
We still have a lot of work to do to secure that funding, but what we're suggesting is $300 million from the federal government over 10 years, so $30 million a year, 150 million a year, or 150 million from the provincial government, so 15 million a year over 10 years, and then 5 million a year for 10 years from philanthropy. So we have actually secured that 50 million from philanthropy. So Ducks Unlimited is very committed to seeing that happen in terms of watershed restoration and wetland restoration in the Fraser. But we need to continue to work on the province and the federal government to secure their involvement in this project. So right now, I was just back in Ottawa to talk to the new fisheries minister, tell her about the Fraser Watershed Initiative, what's involved and how she can play a role, and to ideally secure a $250,000 investment towards creating a business plan that would really detail the kind of priorities that would be worked on, the governance issue, how funding would be spent, and how it would roll out, and where we would tackle the watershed priorities first and second, and how we would maintain, assess, monitor, and continue to improve. Because as you say, it sounds like a lot of money, but over time, and when you look at the size and scale of the problem, it really isn't enough. We need to have an even bigger, significant investment if we really want to change and reverse some of the issues that we're facing. And that's what's needed. And I think as we move towards a restoration economy, this can start to see how First Nations, municipalities, and many others can start to get involved with jobs, careers, and training, and how we retool and look at moving forward on restoring our economies and our communities and our environment towards, I think, a much more positive way of living, and that's what we call a sustainable way of living. That's what our society is focused on, our mandate is.
So when you swam the Fraser River, those many years ago, I won't ask you to recount how many years, were you surprised? Would you be surprised to see how much has not improved on the Fraser, and how much work you're still trying to advocate and get people to pay attention to these kind of challenges? Are you surprised by that?
Well, that's a great question, Patrick, because while there have been improvements over the last 25 years, we still see that there are some significant challenges. Obviously, climate change is playing a greater and greater role. We're seeing change happen faster than we even anticipated. Scientists are telling us these changes are happening very, very fast. And the IPCC report that came out a couple of years ago said to 2030, if we don't turn it around by then, a significant change, we're in real trouble of seeing runaway systems. So that, our scientists are telling us that there are problems with sockeye, with Chinook salmon runs in the Fraser, that we're at risk of losing those. And I think we need to turn that around, and that's, I have seen change. So while there've been, when I swam the river in '95 and again in 2000, I did see improvement. The federal government had the Green Plan at that time, and they actually did change a lot of the pollutants that went in through pulp mill effluent and through sewage, and they've made improvements. Now there were some rollbacks in air emissions, so what wasn't released in the water went up in the air. So we still have some ways to go, but there's been improvements on technology of air emissions as well. So, while we are improving, we are still seeing some problems, and obviously we need to face those problems, and I would suggest in a cumulative way. So the idea of the watershed is, I think, a really good unit to look at all the impacts, because you just can't escape looking at all the impacts and then determining a way forward, a solution that makes sense, whether it's for fish or on land, for moose or caribou, bears or sturgeon. You have a watershed and it all filters down to the river. So that's a very good indicator, monitoring success if you've made real change, using the watershed analogy, and watershed governance and management.
So a couple things. I mean, now that you're former MP, but the big bar, we got your sense. I was watching that through the summer and thought, well, what's the big deal? Just blow the thing up and make a bigger hole. It took forever, and then just a couple days ago, they kind of blew up a big piece, and they're all happy. So why does it take so long for government to take a chance on something that will work, even though what's in place isn't working? So it's a gambit to win.
Right. Well, we were, on one hand, when we first heard about this, we were questioning why it took so long to find out when the slide happened, which this is a huge slide that happened. This is as significant as the 1914 Hell's Gate slide. So that first of all should give you the scale of how big this natural slide was. What was the frustration was how long it took on such a large system in this area, even though it's fairly remote. It's north of Lillooet in the Big Bar region, and it took 6 months to determine that this happened. When you look back, the geologists say it was in the fall of 2019, and then in the summer it happened that there was. I happen to know it was a rancher that called the rafting company. The rafting called myself, and I was able to talk to the minister, the then Minister of Fisheries at the time, and got them on. But why is that? Why is it a landowner that's making that kind of a call? Why isn't it the government itself, through its monitoring of this river, that knows what's going on? They didn't. So if you don't have that kind of monitoring going on, you can't make the quick changes, or at least assess and the steps that are needed to make those, solve those problems, which you're rightly saying, why did the government take so long to finally, let the contract to the contractor who's pushed the dynamite to make, some fish passage? And I was there in the summer and I saw the operation, and it was commendable that they were trying to get as many fish across that passage as possible. They were flying helicopters and then trucking salmon, and they did determine afterwards that unfortunately there was a high degree of mortality. And again, I don't fault the workers for trying to get those salmon across the line. That's what they were all trying to do. But again, this is why we're at such a point in history when you're looking at an amazing system like the Fraser, where we could see the loss of these salmon. If we don't get this Big Bar landslide fish passage solved this year, and we're running out of time. I mean, March, the snow starts melting, and you could have higher water going, and that's harder conditions for that to solve that problem. And if we don't solve the problem this year in this window, those salmon aren't, when they start returning in the fall, they might not get up again. And then you're going to have some very depressed runs. I mean, I talked about the worst return in recorded history. They were anticipating this past summer of having 5 million return. They readjusted downward to 1.1 million. Then they adjusted downwards again to 600,000. And they then say around 250,000 actually made it. Somewhere there. Like, that's an alarming small return. So, and if 70,000 were allegedly said to be trucked across that line, and half of them didn't make it, that's not good. And so we need to focus on that. I'm very glad to hear the minister has said that's a #1 priority for the Pacific region. That's a good thing. So they know this, they have to get this right. And then there's a number of other issues, and I think a significant contribution to habitat restoration is mandatory. They did, to their credit, the federal and provincial governments last year announced $142 million over 5 years to do what's called the BC Salmon Restoration and Innovation Fund. That's a very good start. That's for all of British Columbia. We're suggesting $50 million a year specifically for the Fraser habitat going forward for a decade. So while I think there are some good things that have happened, more work needs to be done, and soon.
So I always find these conversations, you could go on for forever, but so give us a sense of what your society is doing now outside of the $500 million. What are you doing now, and what's your goals for your society in the short and long term?
Sure. We have a vision of seeing the Fraser become the most resilient watershed in the world. So it's an ambitious vision, but one that's really motivating us. So we want to see salmon flourishing in rivers and people flourishing in rivershed communities. So that's our big picture. We want to restore, we want to protect land, and we want to conserve. So in terms of conservation, one of the goals that we have is to sign up or engage 100,000 watershed defenders over the next 10 years by 2030.
Just volunteers, independent people, is it?
Independent people, and they can help in any way, whether it's students or business people or workers or municipalities or First Nations, anyone that wants to get involved. And the exciting thing about, I think, water and watersheds today is it's a unifying issue. It's bringing people together. Where there are other issues that are very divisive, this one's very unifying. So that's rewarding, to be working with people to try and solve tough problems, but working together. So we have that vision that we want to see the Fraser become the most resilient watershed, create a blueprint for the planet, move forward. And we are working, we have our leadership program that will be taking another 10 leaders, working with 10 different organizations from different regions of the Fraser on the summer, going from headwaters to sea. We have the regional river clinics program, where there's different programs happening in each of the regions that are shorter programs. We have our Fraser Fest event, which is happening over the summer.
Which is fun. I mean, it's just a great event to go out and experience, I guess, the magic of the river.
And that's exactly what we're doing. Last year we had 800 people directly either paddling, rafting, cycling, or we had a swimmer, and enjoying a dinner at the end, riverside community events. So we have eco tours. So there's many ways that people can get involved, experience the river, experience the Fraser, get involved and see for themselves what this is all about, and to help give back and become a watershed defender and sign up and help out. And that's our goals. This is not going to be solved by a few individuals. It's going to be solved collectively if we all get involved. We all think it's important. And then we push our governments, whether it's local, provincial, or federal, to do what they can to make a difference as well.
And you've got this, I guess you've got your large initiative document here, which folks can see. So is this available online? Can we read more about that?
Yeah, you can go to rivershed.com and you just see that we're focused. This gives you an idea of the entire Fraser. For your viewers, I don't know if this is a good image, but it shows the Fraser watershed, all 6 regions, and gives you a sense of the scale of British Columbia, how significant this watershed is.
And I guess, it's when you talk about this, the river to me is more like, it is a bit of a cultural. You hear reconciliation and culture. Is that how you see it, the Fraser River?
Absolutely. I think it was said best to me by one elder who said you can't talk about reconciliation without talking about healing the land. Heal the land, you heal the people. And just working together to solve that problem is I think it's a coming together, a unifying way of tackling tough problems. Yeah. But you know, that's our challenge is can we do that? And it's, I mean, we're a small nonprofit, but we want to work together with First Nations, with communities, municipalities, provincial, federal government, labor, industry, business. I mean, we need to work together to solve these problems because they are not going to be solved in silos or, you know, not working together.
Yeah, I must say that sometimes you hear the elders, they give some sage advice, because I get goosebumps when you kind of, you know, it's so simple, you know, heal the land, heal the people,
Yes.
and there are people in trauma, like we're all going to face with this global crisis. I want to thank you for coming in for sure. I know it sounds like you're busier than you were before. You look more relaxed, of course. So there you go. There you go. The Rivershed Society of BC. It's a great cause to get behind. If you want to be a Fraser or a Rivershed ambassador, reach out to their website and check out all this great information. Again, we just heard about $500 million. I mean, it sounds like a lot. It's a lot for me. I only get paid about half that much to work here. But you know, on the East Coast, they probably take $500 million to bring back the cod. We can save the salmon. We can make this place a lot better for Indigenous as well as the people who live on those lands. So, again, thanks for watching. It's Patrick McCarthy reporting with Tri-Cities Community Television. Thanks again, Finn. It's great. It was good, as always. Yeah.